Good Boundaries and Goodbyes by Lysa TerKeurst. Life has a way of delivering moments that completely blindside you. They don't send a warning text or knock gently at your door. They crash through like an uninvited storm, leaving you standing there wondering how you'll ever feel normal again. One of the hardest of these moments, when you finally have to say out loud something you've known in your heart for far too long. Something you've written in your journal 100 times, screamed into your pillow at 2 a.m., but never quite managed to actually say. For one woman, that truth came down to 9 simple words. 9 words that would signal the end of nearly 3 decades of her life. She whispered them first to her counselor, her voice trembling, then, later, to the man she'd promised forever to. The words were, "You cannot build trust that keeps getting broken." Just imagine carrying that weight, loving someone with everything you have, building a whole life together, raising kids, making a home, and slowly realizing that the one thing holding it all together, trust, has been shattered so many times there's barely anything left to stand on. Coming to terms with the fact that the person you love is drowning in addiction, and every conversation you're having isn't really with them at all, it's with the addiction speaking through them. In that fog, you become one of 2 things: someone they can manipulate, or someone they need to deceive. And there's no real love in manipulation and lies. This raw, gut-wrenching reality is what opens the door to one of the most important books you could read right now. It's a book born from deep pain, written by Lysa TerKeurst, called Good Boundaries and Goodbyes. This isn't your typical self-help book collecting dust on a shelf. It's a field guide for the heart, a #1 New York Times bestseller that's become a lifeline for millions who feel completely lost in the messy, complicated world of human relationships. And here's what I can promise you. By the time we finish today, you'll understand something that took Lysa years of heartbreak to figure out. Boundaries aren't walls we throw up to push people away. They're fences we build to protect the sacred ground of who we are. You'll learn the difference between being genuinely good-hearted and being a doormat, and you'll discover how to truly love others without completely losing yourself in the process. This isn't just about surviving your relationships. It's about helping them actually flourish. Have you ever felt like you were losing your mind in a relationship? You know something's off. There's this constant tension in the air, like you're always walking on eggshells. You've prayed about it, you've tried talking, you've bent over backward, changed your behavior, listened to everyone's advice. But nothing changes. The same issues keep showing up, over and over again. And you start wondering, maybe it really is me. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. Maybe my expectations are unrealistic. But deep down, there's this feeling like you're smelling smoke, and you know there's got to be a fire somewhere. Lysa TerKeurst gets this feeling completely. She describes it like going for what should be a beautiful walk on the beach. You're looking forward to the soft sand, the calming waves, maybe a little peace and quiet. But then you step on a sharp sand spur. It stings like crazy. You hop around, pull it out, and keep walking, just a bit more carefully. You can still enjoy the beach. But what if the entire beach was covered with them? What if every few steps, another one pierced your foot? Pretty soon, you'd stop enjoying the walk altogether. You'd become obsessed with just one thing, avoiding the next sting. The beach might still look beautiful from far away, but you know the painful reality. This is what happens in our relationships. At first, a hurtful comment or broken promise is just one sand spur. We can handle it, move past it. But when it becomes a pattern, the entire landscape changes. We stop expecting peace and start bracing for the next hurt. And here's the trap so many of us fall into. Instead of acknowledging that the pain is caused by the spurs, we start blaming ourselves for having sensitive feet. We tell ourselves we're the problem, not the situation. We'd never tell someone who stepped on a thorn that their foot was defective, yet we do this to our own hearts constantly. This exhausting cycle of hope and hurt, connection and confusion, wears us down completely. And it all comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding that Lysa spent years trying to put into words. She finally found it in two simple concepts: access and responsibility. This right here is the key that unlocks everything. It might be the single most important insight in the entire book. Think about it this way. You have keys to your house, passwords to your bank account, a passcode on your phone. You don't hand these out to random people. You give them to people you trust, people who've proven they'll be responsible with that level of access. It would be ridiculous to give your house key to a stranger and just hope for the best. We totally get this when it comes to our stuff, but somehow we're completely blind to this principle when it comes to our hearts. The core message of this book is something you need to write down and never forget. Love can be unconditional, but relational access never should be. We give people level 10 access to our hearts, our time, our emotions, our entire lives, but they're only showing level 3 responsibility. That gap between the high-level access we've given and the low-level responsibility they're showing is the source of all the chaos, frustration, and heartbreak. For years, Lysa made the mistake we all make. She tried to get the other person to step up their responsibility. She begged, reasoned, explained until she was blue in the face, and when they refused, she felt completely stuck, powerless. But here's the thing. The solution isn't to change them. You can't. The solution is to take control of the one thing you actually can control, the level of access you're giving them. Reducing their access to match their actual level of responsibility isn't punishment. It's wisdom. And that, my friend, is what a boundary really is. A boundary is you being responsible enough to say, the way you've handled my heart shows me you're not capable of having this much access to it right now. People who are careless with our hearts shouldn't get unlimited access to them. This sounds so simple, yet it feels revolutionary. Because many of us, especially those trying to be kind and loving people, have been taught the complete opposite. We've bought into this idea that setting boundaries is selfish, maybe even un-Christ-like. But Lysa gently and powerfully tears down this myth. She says boundaries aren't just a good idea, they're a God idea. Think back to the very beginning. In the Garden of Eden, what did God give Adam and Eve? A world full of freedom, with one clear boundary. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Access to paradise required honoring one rule. When they violated that boundary, what happened? Their access changed. Sin created separation. God's love for them didn't disappear, but their access to Him in the garden definitely did. As humanity's sin increased throughout the Old Testament, the boundaries increased too. What started as one simple rule in Genesis became 613 laws by the end of the Law and Prophets. The less responsibility people showed, the more boundaries were needed. This principle is literally woven into creation. God even set a boundary for the sea, which represented chaos in biblical times. He placed a barrier of sand that the chaos wasn't allowed to cross. The lesson is pretty profound. Where there's an abundance of chaos, there's usually a lack of good boundaries. So if boundaries are God's idea and the key to healthy relationships, why are they so incredibly hard for us to actually set? Why do our hands shake and our stomachs churn just thinking about having that conversation? This brings us to the deeper work the book calls us to do. We can't just talk about boundaries. We have to understand the fears keeping us from building them. Lysa shares a deeply personal story from her childhood classroom. On the wall was a bulletin board with every student's name. Under each name were 3 cards: green, yellow, and red. The goal was to keep your green card showing, which meant you were a good kid, kind, responsible, respectful. If you misbehaved, the teacher would call you up to the front of the class to flip your card to yellow. A second offense meant the dreaded red card and a trip to the principal's office. For a sensitive kid like Lysa, this system wasn't about learning rules. It was terrifying public judgment of her character. A yellow or red card didn't mean she'd had a bad moment. It meant she was a bad person. This created a deep fear of being judged wrongly. But it got worse. She watched other kids make up stories about the good kids just to see them get a yellow card. It was a game to them, but a nightmare to her. That experience planted a seed for a mindset many of us carry into adulthood without even realizing it. The mindset is this: other people's opinions of me define who I am. If we believe this, we become desperate to control how others see us. We turn into people pleasers, not because we're naturally nice, but because we're terrified. Our core fear when setting a boundary isn't that we're being mean. It's that someone will think poorly of us. They'll misunderstand us. They'll label us as selfish, controlling, or unforgiving. And if their opinion defines us, then that negative label feels like it's destroying our identity. So to fight against that label, we drop the boundary. We'd rather suffer through the chaos and disrespect than endure the pain of being misunderstood. Have you ever heard statements like these when you've tried to stand up for yourself? You're being so dramatic, it's not that big a deal. And you call yourself a Christian? Jesus wouldn't treat people this way. I thought Christians were supposed to be forgiving. You've changed. You're not the person I used to know. You're just crazy. This is completely irrational. These statements hit so hard for 3 reasons. 1. They're offensive because they paint a false picture of who we are. 2. They're threatening because they suggest that if we don't back down, we might lose the relationship and whatever we're getting from it. And 3, they're disillusioning. They make us question our own sanity. We start wondering if maybe we really are the problem. But here's the crucial insight Lysa offers. These triggering statements aren't a sign that your boundary is wrong. They're evidence that your boundary is necessary. Unhealthy people absolutely hate healthy boundaries. A manipulator has never met a boundary they liked. When their lack of responsibility doesn't automatically become your emergency, they get offended. They'll try to make you feel guilty, punished, or confused, so you'll drop the boundary and things can go back to the dysfunctional normal they're comfortable with. On the flip side, healthy people who want healthy relationships don't have a problem with other people's healthy boundaries. They respect your limits because they're in touch with their own. They understand that no isn't a rejection of them as a person. It's just a responsible statement about your own capacity. So how do we find the strength to hold a boundary when someone's pushing back with these hurtful, manipulative statements? We have to do the hard work of untangling our identity from their opinion. Other people don't get the final say about who we are. God does. This requires asking a profound question. Who am I, really? Not who does my friend think I am, or my parent, or my spouse. Who did God actually create me to be? Lysa encourages brutal honesty here. She admits that without boundaries, she can become anxious, bitter, resentful, and distant. That's not who she really is. At her core, she's kind, creative, generous, and loyal. Boundaries don't turn her into a mean person. They protect her from situations that wear her down into the worst version of herself. Boundaries help us stay true to who we really are. When we lose sight of this, it's often because a deeper fear has taken root. It's a fear that goes beyond just wanting to be liked. It's the fear that our needs won't be met. The book asks us to look at a list of needs we often bring into relationships. The need to be validated, to be in control, to be appreciated, to be chosen, to be loved. We all have these needs. They're completely legitimate. The problem happens when our desire for these things shifts into a demand. When we think, I want to be chosen, that's a desire. But when we think, I must be chosen by this person or I won't be okay, that's a demand. And when we live with these demands, we become the most dangerous kind of people pleaser. We aren't just trying to make them happy. We're desperately trying to get something from them that we feel we can't live without. And this reveals the deepest, most vulnerable truth of all. The reason we get so tangled up in these unhealthy dynamics often isn't really about the other person at all. It's about a gap in our faith. Lysa puts it this way, and it's a statement that can stop you in your tracks. We will always desperately want from other people what we fear we will never get from God. Read that again. We're afraid there's going to be this devastating gap between what we think we need and what God will actually provide. So we make other people our answer. We make them our source of security, validation, and worth. And we become terrified of setting a boundary because we fear they'll withdraw, taking with them the one thing we think we need to survive. It's a backward kind of security that only makes us more insecure. Because people were never designed to fill the God-shaped hole in our hearts. Trying to make them do it isn't just exhausting for us. It's actually cruel to them. We're keeping them from feeling their own desperate need for God. Jesus modeled this perfectly. He served from a place of fullness, not for a feeling of fullness. He loved people enough to give them the choice to walk away. When the rich young ruler chose his wealth over following him, Jesus didn't chase him down, drop the boundary, and beg him to come back. He let him go. So what does this look like in actual practice? How do we move from understanding these ideas to actually living them? The book provides a powerful, practical framework. First, a good boundary isn't about controlling the other person, it's about controlling yourself. Your focus shifts from, how can I make them change, to, what am I willing to tolerate in my environment, and what will I do if this boundary is crossed? Second, grace has a place in this conversation. A great piece of advice from Lysa's counselor, Jim Kress, is, say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean. We want conflict resolution, not conflict escalation. You can start with empathy. I love you, and because I want our relationship to be healthy, we need to talk about something. Third, and this is crucial, a boundary without a real consequence will never be taken seriously. It's just a weak suggestion. If you tell a friend who's always late, I can't wait for you anymore, but then you continue waiting every single time, your words mean nothing. The consequence might be, if you're more than 10 minutes late, I'm going into the movie without you. I'll save you a seat. You're not punishing them. You're taking control of your own time and experience. You're informing them of your choice, not debating whether your need is valid. But what happens when you've done all this? You've accepted reality. You've set boundaries with grace. You've followed through with consequences, and still the person refuses to honor them. The addictions continue, the lies persist, the disrespect doesn't stop. What happens when a relationship shifts from being difficult to being destructive? A destructive relationship, as defined by Christian counselor Leslie Vernick, involves pervasive and repetitive patterns that result in tearing someone down or inhibiting a person's growth. When this is happening, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and sometimes even for them is to say goodbye. This is usually the part we resist most. It feels like failure, it feels mean, it feels so final. But Lysa reframes this in a beautiful way. She discovered that the original phrase for goodbye back in the late 1500s was, "God be with ye." It was actually a blessing, a release. It wasn't a door being slammed. It was an act of entrusting someone to God's care as you parted ways. I'd like a little more "God be with you" in my goodbyes. Even Jesus had to say goodbye. He watched people walk away. He was betrayed and abandoned. But here's the key. Even when people turned on him, he didn't let a goodbye turn him into someone he was never meant to be. He let people walk away without letting go of who he was. This is our goal, to acknowledge the hurt without unleashing more hurt, to admit a necessary ending without unnecessary slander, to walk away with our integrity still intact. But this isn't a clean, neat process. It's a process of grief. You're not just grieving the loss of the person, you're grieving the loss of the picture you had in your mind of who you wanted them to be, the potential you saw, the future you'd imagined. That's why Lysa introduces the concept of having, quote, "a million little funerals." These are private moments of closure that no one else attends. It's a process where you acknowledge what isn't and what will never be. You give yourself permission to cry. You release the unrealistic image you've been clinging to. You accept that your desire for the relationship doesn't line up with their desire or capability. And you release them to be responsible for their own life, just as you're responsible for yours. It's in these little funerals that you make space. You let go of resentment and bitterness, and you create room to receive joy, hope, and a better future. This brings us to the most difficult goodbye of all, the one at the heart of Lysa's own story. For years she stayed and fought for her marriage through addiction and betrayal. She held on, believing her love could be enough. But she came to a devastating realization. She was living in a house undergoing demolition, not renovation. A renovation is a temporary mess for the sake of something more beautiful. But what was happening in her marriage wasn't construction, it was destruction. She wasn't the one breaking promises. She wasn't the one leaving the place of health they'd worked so hard to reach. And in that moment of clarity, she was able to reframe her choice. It was a line that freed her, and it can free you too. I'm not giving up. I'm not walking away. I'm choosing to finally accept reality. Mental health, her counselor reminded her, is a commitment to reality at all costs. Sometimes the reality is that a relationship is unsustainable. Sometimes we have to accept that we've done all we can do. In the end, this journey isn't just about learning a new set of rules for relationships. It's about coming home to yourself. It's about realizing you don't have to betray who God made you to be in order to love the people in your life. It's about understanding that a whole and healthy you is the greatest gift you can offer the world. And sometimes, the road to becoming fully alive is paved with good boundaries, and even a few necessary, heartbreaking, and ultimately good goodbyes. As we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a few thoughts that have been sitting with me. What Lysa TerKeurst has done in Good Boundaries and Goodbyes is more than just write a book. She's given us a completely new language for love. For so long, many of us, especially in faith communities, have been operating with broken vocabulary. We've confused love with enabling, forgiveness with reconciliation, and self-sacrifice with self-destruction. We've been taught that being a good person means having no needs, no limits, and no right to protect ourselves from harm. And this broken language has led to broken hearts and broken relationships. This book is like a dictionary for a healthier way of loving. It gives us permission to be human, to have limits, to feel pain, and to say, "This is not okay." It teaches us that the most loving thing we can do is often the thing that feels hardest. To hold people accountable for their actions, not by trying to control them, but by controlling the access we give them. In a world that's increasingly chaotic and polarized, where relationships often feel fragile and full of tension, this message feels more vital than ever. It's a guide for navigating not just the big, dramatic betrayals, but the everyday frictions that wear us down. The friend who always takes and never gives, the family member whose negativity drains the life out of you, the boss who has zero respect for your time. The most powerful lesson for me is the shift in perspective from external control to internal responsibility. For years, I think we've been asking the wrong question. We ask, how can I get them to change? This book teaches us to ask, how can I stay true to who I am, regardless of what they choose to do? That's a question that returns power, dignity, and sanity to us. It frees us from the exhausting and impossible task of managing another person's life, and calls us to the worthy and completely possible task of stewarding our own. So how can you start applying this today? I'd suggest 3 small steps. First, just for yourself, identify one relationship in your life where there might be a mismatch between the level of access you've given and the level of responsibility the other person has shown. You don't have to do anything about it yet. Just name it. Awareness is the first step. Second, practice one small, low-stakes boundary this week. It could be with a friend, coworker, or family member. Maybe it's simply saying, I'd love to help with that, but I can't do it today. I can on Friday. Or, I only have about 10 minutes to talk right now. Notice how it feels to state your limit calmly and kindly, without over-explaining or apologizing. Third, take a quiet moment and answer the question from the book, Who Am I? Write down 3 qualities that are true of you at your very best, independent of anyone else's opinion. Maybe you're compassionate, resilient, or creative. Let that be your anchor. Remind yourself that a boundary isn't a rejection of love. It's a protection of the person God made you to be, so you can love others from that place of strength. That was a summary of Good Boundaries and Goodbyes by Lysa TerKeurst. We've walked through the key ideas today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the landmarks and the main roads, but it can never replace the feeling of actually walking the paths, breathing the air, and letting the journey change you. The real magic happens when you read the book for yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has echoed in your heart, I really encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning new information. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your relationships, and the very nature of love. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you something to think about, please do us a favor and hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.